while her husband was away on a business trip. Anna finally decided to organize the storage closet. She grabbed a stool to reach the highest shelf and went to grab some old preserves. But as she pulled one of the jars, she froze at the sight of what fell from above. Before we begin, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. I wish you a very good listen. Michael left on a Sunday night. As usual, without many words, he left his suitcase by the door. That dark blue carry-on with the frayed handle Anna had given him for their third wedding anniversary. Back then, she still picked out gifts with meaning. She would imagine his excitement. That suitcase had traveled across half the country since then. Its corners were scuffed, and the zipper on the side pocket hadn't closed right in a long time. Michael promised to get it fixed. Every time, and every time he forgot, he put on his shoes, stood up straight, patted his pockets out of habit. Phone, keys, wallet. He looked at a spot somewhere past Anna, toward the mirror in the hallway, and said, "All right, I'm heading out. I'll be back Friday, maybe sooner. I'll call you when I dot Storyland." Anna nodded. He leaned in, brushing her cheek in passing, like stamping a seal on a document. She smelled his cologne, the one with woody notes she bought him every year for Christmas, because once he had mentioned he liked it. He said it exactly once, 7 years ago. Since then, she bought it. Since then, he wore it. He never asked about it again. He never thanked her. He just grabbed it from the bathroom shelf the way one grabs a toothbrush. The door closed. The deadbolt clicked. Anna stood in the hallway, listening to his footsteps on the stairs. The building was a pre-war walk up, and every step echoed with a hollow, deep thud. Then the footsteps faded. The heavy lobby door slammed, and silence settled in. She stood there, thinking that she couldn't remember when she had stopped, waiting for him, not in the sense of waiting for him to return from his trip, although that, too, but really waiting for him to say something warm at dinner, to hug her out of nowhere for no reason, to ask how her day went and actually want to hear the answer. That feeling faded without a specific moment, without a fight or resentment. Simply, one day, she realized that his departure didn't stir anything in her, neither anxiety nor relief, just emptiness, a habit, like turning off the lamp before going to sleep. They had been together for 9 years. They met at a mutual friend's birthday party. Michael arrived late, his jacket soaked because he'd been caught in a sudden downpour, and he spent the entire night telling jokes that made Anna laugh until her sides hurt. He worked for a small construction firm, always visiting job sites, and he had endless stories about them, about the clients, about how a raccoon had once broken into the site trailer and shredded the project blueprints. Anna worked as an accountant at a local medical clinic. Life was simple, predictable, and Michael slipped into it easily, as if he had always been there. The first 3 years were genuine. They went to the coast every summer, renting a little cabin from an older woman who brought them fresh peaches from her orchard every morning. They fought over stupid things. He never squeezed the toothpaste from the bottom. She took too long when they were in a rush. They made up quickly, sometimes in funny ways. He would show up with a warm box of donuts and say, "This is my white flag." They talked late into the night, lying in the dark, and Anna would fall asleep feeling like there was someone truly there beside her. Then, something began to slip away, without abruptness, without a scandal. Michael started working more. He moved to a larger corporate firm with frequent travel and irregular hours. He coming home later. He started sharing less. At first, Anna would ask how his day was, what was new, but his answers grew shorter and shorter. "Fine. Same old. Tired. Let's talk later." Eventually, she stopped asking, not out of spite. She just got used to it. They learned to exist next to each other, like two objects on the same shelf. They weren't in each other's way, but they weren't touching either. In the evenings, Michael stayed on the couch, scrolling on his phone. Anna read or watched shows on her tablet. In the kitchen, on weekends, he went to the garage to tinker with his car, even though the car didn't seem to need that much attention. Sometimes they ate dinner together, and a silence hovered over the table, not heavy, not hostile, just empty, like a waiting room where everyone is expecting something nobody can name. Once, over coffee, Anna's friend Emily asked, "Anna, are you two doing okay? You're so quiet lately." "Yes," Anna replied, surprising herself with how easily the words slipped out, exactly the same way it did with Michael. On Monday, Anna took the day off. She had errands piling up. She needed to pack away the winter coats, wash the windows now that spring was here, and organize the bathroom cabinet, where empty shampoo bottles had been living next to full ones for months. The little things domestic life is made of when you're doing it alone. By early afternoon, it was time for the storage closet. It was tiny, barely 5 by 3 feet windowless, with a weak bulb that had been flickering for 2 years. Michael called it his territory. He kept his tools there, some boxes, and jars of homemade pickles his mother sent over, that nobody ever ate. Anna had gotten used to staying out of it, not because he explicitly forbade it, but because every time she tried, he'd say, "Don't mess with that. I have my own system in there. I'll organize it later." So, she didn't mess with it. 1 year, 2, 5. But that Monday, something shifted. Maybe she had just grown sick of that eternal phrase, "I'll organize it later." Maybe she just wanted a truly clean slate in everything. Anna opened the closet door, flipped on the flickering light, and surveyed the shelves. On the bottom, tools, a box of nails and screws, a power drill in a dusty case. On the middle shelf, those quart-sized jars with cloudy brine where you could vaguely make out cucumbers and peppers. On the top shelf, cardboard boxes, an old coffee maker, and behind them, something she had never noticed before. Anna went to the kitchen for a step stool, climbed up, reached high, and pushed aside one pickle jar, then another, then a third. Her fingers brushed against something flat, metallic, and cold. She tried to pull it carefully, but the box was heavier than it looked. Her fingers slipped. The tin edge scraped her palm, and the box tumbled down. It hit the floor with a hollow crash. The lid popped off, and its contents spilled across the hardwood. Photographs, papers, a keychain with a little teddy bear, and something small and colorful, a piece of notebook paper with a drawing. Anna stepped down from the stool and knelt on the floor. First photograph, Michael without his jacket, wearing a gray t-shirt she thought they had thrown out years ago. He is smiling, not that polite half smile she had gotten used to in recent years, but a wide, open smile, like in their old photos at the coast. Next to him is a young woman, around 30, brunette, with a soft, round face and dimples. She is smiling, too, her head resting on his shoulder. In Michael's arms is a little girl, maybe 5 years old, wearing a funny Santa hat with a pom-pom. In the background, a decorated Christmas tree, tinsel, blinking lights reflecting in the window. Second photograph, summer, the same little girl, now in a sundress and sandals, her braid coming undone. Michael is holding her hand. They are in a park near a fountain. Both are laughing. The girl has thrown her head back, and Michael is looking at her with an expression Anna recognized instantly, even though she had never seen it directed at anyone else. Pure, unfiltered, genuine tenderness. She picked up the notebook paper. A child's drawing, a lopsided house with a triangular roof, and smoke coming out of the chimney. A. Yellow sun in the corner. And 3. Figures. A big one, a medium one, and a very small one. Below, in wobbly, painstaking child's handwriting, learning how to shape the letters. Daddy Michael, I love you. Anna sat on the floor of the closet for a long time, holding that piece of paper with both hands. The bulb flickered, went dark for a second, then buzzed back to life. From the kitchen came the steady ticking of the wall clock, the one with the pendulum Michael's mother had given them when they moved in, which Anna had always wanted to take down but never did. She gently set the drawing aside and began to gather what else had fallen. A residential lease agreement, 2 bedrooms, 500 square feet, 3rd floor, tenant's name, Michael, address, a neighboring suburb, a street Anna recognized because there was a great farmer's market there where she liked to buy fresh heirloom tomatoes and basil in the summer. Lease term, 5 years, renewed 3 times. The last time in January. Receipts from a children's clothing store, winter boots, toddler size 5, a pink backpack with a unicorn, a watercolor paint set, the dates, last week, and a greeting card, the standard kind you buy at a pharmacy, with a painted bouquet on the cover. Inside, regular, feminine, slightly tired handwriting. We are waiting for you at home. We miss you. Your girls. Anna put everything back in the box, closed the lid, and set it on the floor next to her. She didn't cry. She waited for the tears to come. It felt like they should, that it was the normal reaction when you discover something like this. But instead of tears, there was something else, a strange, almost physical clarity, as if for a long time she had been looking through a fogged-up window, used to the blurred shapes and accepting them as reality, and someone had just wiped the glass clean with rag. Everything was sharp, precise, almost painfully detailed. She stood up, carried the box out of the closet, set it on the kitchen table, and spent another hour there, methodically going through it like she did at work when auditing the quarterly financial reports. Every document, every photograph, every receipt. The lease had first been signed 6 years ago. 6. Anna did the math. 3 years before the frequent business trips began, which meant it all started even earlier, which meant that back when they still talked at night, when they still went to visit his mother on weekends, when she still believed they were just going through a rough patch, he was already renting an apartment in the next town over. That night, Anna lay in the dark, staring at the ceiling. Beside her, on the other side of the bed, was the usual emptiness of when he traveled. Before, on nights like this, she fell asleep fast, the quiet, no one snoring, no one tossing and turning. Now, the silence was different. She wasn't thinking about the pain. The pain was there, standing just on the other side of the door, but it hadn't come in yet. Anna was thinking about the logistics. How did all of this actually work in practice? 6 years, 2 apartments, 2 homes, 2 women, each believing they knew where he spent his nights. That didn't just require lies. It required a system, a tight schedule, control. She remembered all the trips, at least 1 or 2 a month, sometimes more. Did he ever show her the boarding passes? Anna tried to remember and couldn't. It seemed he used to show them at first. Then he stopped. Then she stopped asking. She remembered a night 4 years ago when she finally gathered the courage and said, "Michael, don't you think we should start thinking about having a baby? I'm 33. Time is ticking." He had put down his phone, looked at her seriously, and answered with a smoothness that left no room for argument. "Anna, a kid right now. We need to get financially stable first. Build up our savings. Let's revisit this in a couple of years." She had agreed. She always agreed, not because she was weak, but because his arguments always sounded reasonable, logical, thoughtful, like a man planning for their future. Now she understood. He already had a daughter. When he told her it was too soon, the little girl in the photo would have been about a year old. He was holding her, smiling at the camera, buying her boots and paint sets, and then coming home, lying down next to Anna, and falling asleep without a single muscle in his face twitching. Anna rolled over and pulled the blanket up to her chin. Outside, cars drove by. In the apartment next door, a TV murmured through the drywall. An ordinary night, an ordinary apartment, except everything she had considered ordinary had just been revealed as a stage set carefully, built, meticulously maintained, and convincing enough that she had mistaken it for real life. For 9 years, from the keychain, she removed a standard brass key with a blue plastic top. She slipped it into the pocket of her hub. Everything else went back into the box. In the morning, Anna woke up early, before the alarm, before sunrise. The kettle boiled, then cooled. She never poured the tea. She sat at the kitchen table in her robe, watching the sky lighten outside, rolling the blue-topped key between her fingers. Small, light, completely ordinary, the kind that opens standard deadbolts in standard apartment complexes. She could have put it back, closed the closet, forgotten it, never gone, never found out, kept living the way she was living, in the usual silence, the usual routine, the usual ignorance. But something inside her had already shifted, and it had no intention of going back to its place. She got dressed. Jeans, a blouse, a jacket. She paused in front of the hallway mirror and didn't recognize herself. Not physically. Her face was the same, with the same fine lines at the corners of her eyes, her hair pulled back into the same low bun, but her eyes looked different, like someone who has already made a decision, but hasn't said it out loud yet. She ordered a rideshare on her phone, typing in the address from the lease. The driver, an older guy with a thick mustache listening to classic rock on the radio, glanced in the rearview mirror and asked where he should drop her off. Right at the front entrance. Anna replied, even though she had no idea what the building looked like. The drive took about 20 minutes. The neighborhood was familiar. Anna had been to the farmer's market. Here, she had bought heirloom tomatoes from a woman who always tossed in a handful of fresh basil and said, "Take it, honey, it's fresh picked." But she had never walked past the market. The streets got narrower, the buildings shorter, 4-story brick buildings, small lawns with blooming dogwood trees, a quiet, lived-in suburb where neighbors knew each other by sight, and the elderly women sitting on the benches weren't scenery. They were the neighborhood watch. The car stopped. Anna got out and looked at the building. Red brick, for stories, freshly painted, black railings. In the courtyard, there was a yellow metal swing set, one of the seats slightly crooked, and a sandbox next to it. Inside the sandbox lay a forgotten plastic bucket. On the second floor balcony, someone had hung a planter box with geraniums, bright red flowers, burning against the brick. Anna walked into the building. It smelled like roast chicken and something floral. Someone had left a potted violet on the window ledge. Between the floors, the stairwell was clean. On the bulletin board was a notice for a tenants meeting and a flyer for a local plumber. 3rd floor, left door. Anna stopped. She looked at the white doorbell. Next to it lay a mat that read, "Welcome." She thought that this was probably the wrong way to do this, showing up unannounced, without a plan, without a rehearsed speech. She didn't even know what she was going to say. "Hi, I'm your man's wife. Sorry, but I need to know." It sounded ridiculous, like a bad soap opera. She rang the bell. Quick, light footsteps approached from the other side. The deadbolt clicked. The door opened. Standing in the doorway was the woman. From the photographs, up close, she looked both younger and older than in the pictures. A face without makeup, slightly pale skin, the kind of dark circles that appear on women who haven't slept well in a long time, but have stopped noticing it. A dark green cardigan frayed at the elbows, hair thrown up in a messy clip that was slipping to one side. She looked at Anna for a second, two, three. There was something in her eyes, not fear, not anger, recognition, as if she had been expecting this visit. Not necessarily today, not necessarily from Anna, but expecting that someday someone would show up and make it all real. "You're his wife," she said. There was no question mark in her voice. "Yes," Anna replied. Silence. In a room down the hall, a TV was playing cartoons, judging by the silly voices. The woman took a step back. "Come in." The hallway was narrow, cramped, with little kids, shoes piled on the mat and a pink umbrella in the corner. On the coat, rack-hung jackets. One adult's, two little girls, one for fall, one for winter. On the entryway, table, hand lotion, a hairbrush with a tangle of hair, a drawing taped to the wall. A blue dog with 6 legs labeled Buster. "Sophie is in her room," the woman said, pointing toward the closed door where the cartoon sounds were coming from. "I'll be right back." She led Anna into the kitchen. It was tiny, maybe 60 square feet at most. A table pushed against the window. 2 stools. On the sill, a pot of wilting petunias and a plastic sippy cup with the dregs of chocolate milk. On the fridge, souvenir magnets and 3 drawings held up by a ladybug clip. In one of them, Anna recognized the exact same style, lopsided house. "Son." 3 figures. "Coffee?" the woman asked automatically, the way you ask any guest. "No, thank you." They sat across from each other. The woman placed her hands on the table. Her fingers were trembling slightly, and she pressed them flat against the wood to force them to be still. "My name is Megan," she said, "though you probably already know that." "No," Anna replied. "I didn't know anything until yesterday. I knew nothing." Megan nodded, took a deep breath, and looked out the window at the courtyard. Down on the pavement, some kids were kicking a soccer ball. Their voices and laughter drifted up. "I'm 32, she began. Her voice was steady, without drama, like someone telling a story not for the first time, even if previously she had only ever told it to herself. "Sophie is 5. She'll be 6 in the fall." She paused. "I met Michael 7 years ago. I was working as an account manager for a building supply company. He came in representing a contractor, negotiating bids. Charming, laid back, with that smile. You know, when someone smiles and you feel like they're smiling just for you." Anna knew that was exactly how he had smiled at her 9 years ago at that birthday party with the wet jacket. He said he was married from the start. Megan continued. He didn't hide it, but he said things had been over with his wife for a long time, that they only lived together because of the apartment, that separating was complicated, some issue with joint assets, debts. He didn't want to get into details, but he kept saying, "I'm handling it in a month, in 6 months, after the holidays, after we pay off the credit cards." There was always a specific deadline, and that deadline always got pushed. She rubbed the bridge of her nose. "I waited. At first I believed him. Then I just got used to believing him. They are 2 different things, if you know what I mean. When I got pregnant, he said it would speed everything up, that now he had a real reason, that he was going to talk to his wife right after the holidays. Sophie was born. The holidays passed, and he just kept showing up a couple of times a week. He'd stay the night, leave in the morning, or come by on weekends. He said his wife was used to it, that they lived like roommates, that she didn't even notice. Anna listened. feeling a strange split. Inside her head, these were words about her life, about how she didn't notice. Megan was describing the other side of the wall, and on this side stood Anna, totally convinced they were just going through a difficult phase. I was stupid, Megan said, without self-pity. It's just that for a long time, I didn't want to admit it, because admitting it meant being alone with a daughter, and being alone is scary, especially when he walks through the door and Sophie runs to him, hugs him, and yells, "Daddy." And you think, fine, let it be like this. This is better than nothing. And it didn't interrupt. She looked at Megan and thought, we were both stupid. We both believed him. We both waited, except he told each of us his own version of the same lie. To Anna, that everything was fine. They had just grown a little distant, as married couples do. To Megan, that his marriage was dead, and he would finalize the paperwork any day now. From the other room, the little girl laughed. A loud, bubbling laugh, the way only small children know how to laugh with their whole bodies. Megan glanced toward the sound, and for a second, her face transformed. It grew soft, open. Then she turned back to Anna. 3 days ago, I found a piece of paper in his jacket pocket. He left his coat here. It was a phone number and a woman's name. Not yours. She stood up, went to the bedroom, and came back with a standard blue cardboard folder with an elastic band. He kept this here. He told me there was no room at his house, that they were work documents. I never snoop, but after I found that number, I looked. She placed the folder on the table, between the empty sippy cup and the salt shaker. Look, Anna opened the folder. Her hands weren't shaking. She surprised herself. Somewhere in the back of her mind, she noted, wow, my hands are perfectly still, as if her body already knew what was coming and had braced for impact. First, printed bank statements, columns of numbers, dates, account numbers, small but regular amounts, 2 or 3 times a month. Over the course of a year and a half, the money was being wired out of her and Michael's joint checking account, the one his paycheck went into, and the one Anna transferred her half into for the mortgage, utilities, and groceries. It was going into an account in Megan's name. Anna looked up. Megan shook her head. I thought it was his money. He said it was side gigs, bonuses. I never checked the source account. Second, a printed email chain. Michael and a guy named Ryan. From the context, Ryan was a friend in auto sales or insurance. Michael was asking if there was a way to sell a car registered in his wife's name without her knowing or needing her signature. Ryan answered cautiously, you can, but you'd need her to sign a power of attorney or get the title transfer notarized with her there. Michael asked follow-up questions, looking for loopholes. Anna thought of their car, a gray sedan she had bought with her own money 2 years ago, keeping the title in her name because it was easier for her insurance policy. Michael drove it more than she did. She never minded. And third, a ripped piece of notebook paper covered in familiar handwriting, small, with a distinct lean to the left. Michael always wrote with a leftward slant, and Anna used to find it endearing. Written on the paper was a number, a specific dollar amount, the exact amount Anna had received 3 months ago from the sale of Grandma Celia's old farmhouse upstate, a piece of land with a decaying cabin and some apple trees, all that was left of the grandmother who had raised Anna after her mother died. Anna had hesitated to sell it, but she finally did because the property taxes were piling up and no one was taking care of it. She deposited the money into her personal savings account. She hadn't told anyone the exact amount except Michael. He had asked casually at dinner, so what did the farmhouse end up going for? She told him. He nodded, said, that's great. and went back to his phone. Now, that exact figure was written on the paper along with the date of the deposit and a thick question mark traced over twice. He knew when he was calculating how to get his hands on it. Anna slid the paper back in and closed the folder. The kitchen fell silent. In the other room, the cartoons ended, and little Sophie called out, "Mommy, put another one on. Just a minute." "Sweetie," Megan called back. Her voice wavered just a bit on the last syllable. She turned to Anna. "Give me a second." Anna nodded. Megan left the room. From down the hall came the low domestic murmur of conversation. "Mommy, is Daddy coming over?" Then Sophie showing off a drawing. Megan returned and sat back down. Her eyes were red but dry. "Can I make copies of this?" Anna asked, pointing to the folder. "Take it all," Megan replied. "I don't need it anymore." Anna stood up, picked up the folder, and stood by the table, unsure of what to say. Every word felt either too big or too small for what was sitting between them. "Megan," she finally said, "I didn't know anything. Not about you. Not about Sophie. Not about this apartment. Nothing." "I know," Megan replied. "I know that now." Anna walked out of the building, and the autumn sun hit her eyes. She squinted, standing on the concrete steps. In the courtyard, kids were still kicking the soccer ball. A woman on a bench was shelling peanuts. A tabby cat darted across the sidewalk and ducked into a bush. The world was exactly the same, calm, ordinary, completely indifferent to what had just shattered inside a small third-floor apartment. Anna clutched the folder to her chest and walked out to the street to hail a cab. In her jacket pocket was the blue-topped key. She didn't need it anymore, but she didn't throw it away. Not yet. The cab dropped her off at home. Anna walked up the stairs with a folder tucked under her arm, as if she were carrying something totally mundane. A work file, a bag of groceries. The second-floor neighbor, Mrs. Higgins, was wrestling with her lock. She saw Anna and gave a little nod. "Afternoon, Anna. You look a little pale today. Didn't sleep well," Anna replied, and she smiled. The smile was genuine, which felt strange. Inside, she took off her jacket, hung it on the hook, went to the kitchen, and put the kettle on. While the water heated up, she pulled a standard legal pad out of a drawer, the one she usually used for grocery lists, and sat at the table. She opened to a blank page, wrote "to do" at the top, and underlined it. The kettle whistled. She poured her tea, took a sip, burned her tongue, and set the mug down. She pulled the bank statements out of the folder and spread them in front of her. Then, she picked up her phone. First, the bank. She called customer service, went through the security questions, and asked for the accounts department. Her voice was calm, professional. She explained she needed to transfer all the funds from her joint checking account into her personal savings. The representative confirmed the balance. Anna authorized the transfer down to the last cent. The transaction processed in 3 minutes. Next, Michael's debit card linked to the joint account. Anna requested a freeze. The rep asked for a reason. Suspected unauthorized access. She said it wasn't even a lie. Card frozen. Then, she changed the password to her banking app. She wrote the new password on the legal pad, ripped the page out, and put it in her wallet. She drew a check mark next to the first item. Next, the lawyer, Emily, the friend who had asked if everything was okay, had given her the number. Emily had gotten divorced 2 years ago and went through the whole grinder, dividing assets, screaming matches, shattered nerves. She had kept the contact info for a lawyer who, in her words, doesn't cry with you, just gets it done. Anna dialed. He answered on the third ring. "Mr. Hayes, good afternoon. My name is Anna." Briefly, without beating around the Bush. She laid out the situation. Husband leading a double life. Second, family. A child. She had documentary evidence. Transfers from the joint account. An email chain with a broker about selling her car. Notes tracking her personal inheritance. Money. She needed to protect her assets. And file for divorce. Mr. Hayes listened without interrupting. Then, he spoke. First, we file a temporary restraining order on all marital assets, so he can't liquidate anything without your consent. The car, if it's titled in your name, is yours, but we'll lock it down just to be safe. Second, document every single transfer from that joint account. Pull the statements for the last 2 years, preferably 3. Third, the apartment, if you bought it before the marriage using your own funds, it's exempt from asset division, but I need the paper trail, the deed, the closing documents, everything you have. Fourth, do not tip him off. As long as he doesn't know you know. You have the upper hand, use it. Anna wrote everything down on the legal pad in her neat handwriting, bullet point by bullet point. When can you come in? Mr. Hayes asked. Tomorrow morning. I'll see you at 9:00. He hung up. Second check mark. The next morning, Anna went to the county courthouse and the bank. The lines were short. It was a Tuesday morning. The waiting areas were mostly filled with retirees holding manila envelopes and a young couple with a stroller. Anna took a number, waited to be called, and filed the necessary paperwork with her lawyer's guidance. The clerk, a young woman with long, acrylic nails that made typing difficult, reviewed the forms. This places a freeze on all joint financial accounts and prevents the transfer of the vehicle title. She confirmed. Yes, Anna said. It took less than an hour. Anna took her stamped copies and slid them into the blue folder she had taken from Megan. It was hers now. Next, the car documents. They were in the bottom drawer of the bedroom dresser, under a pile of winter blankets. Michael never touched them. He thought keeping track of paperwork was her department and assumed Anna never checked it either. The title, the registration, the bill of sale, the insurance policy. Anna reviewed each one, slid them into a plastic sleeve, and put them in the folder. Then she paused, took them back out, and ran them through the home printer. The one Michael had bought 2 years ago for work, but that only she ever used. By late afternoon, everything was ready. Anna sat at the kitchen table. In front of her sat the heavy folder, organized by section, the legal pad with its check marks, the mug of cold tea. Outside, it was getting dark. In the apartment, across the street, a light flicked on, and Anna saw the silhouette of a woman, setting a table, arranging plates, carrying a pot from the stove. An ordinary night for someone else. She picked up her phone and dialed her sister's number. Rachel was 4 years older. She lived out in the suburbs and worked as a curriculum coordinator at a middle school. She was married to Eric, a quiet, reliable guy who fixed whatever broke and never raised his voice. They had 2 boys, a golden retriever, and a big vegetable garden where Rachel spent her summers. They talked on the phone once a week, usually on Sundays. The conversations were always the standard routine. How are you? How's your health? Anything new with Mom? Rachel, can you come over? Anna said. A pause on the other end. Rachel had never heard her little sister use that tone of voice. Not scared, not crying, but vibrating, like a guitar string pulled to the absolute breaking point. I'm on my way, Rachel said, asking no questions. She arrived an hour later. Eric had driven her and stayed down in the car. He didn't come up. He understood without needing to be told that this wasn't a time for company. Rachel walked into the apartment, took off her coat, and looked at her sister. Anna was standing in the hallway. Her face was calm, her hands resting loosely at her sides on the kitchen table, clearly visible from the hall. The folder, the legal pad, the metal box. You've decided everything, haven't you? Rachel said. Yes. Anna said. I just needed you to know. They went into the kitchen. Anna laid it all out in front of her sister, from the photos to the bank statements. She explained it briefly, skipping unnecessary details. The box, Megan, Sophie, the wire transfers, the guy trying to sell her car, the money from Grandma's farmhouse. Rachel listened in silence. The only tell was her fingers gripping the edge of the table, her knuckles turning white. 6 years, Rachel finally said. 6 years of this. Yes. Have you filed the papers yet? Not yet. Assets first. Then the divorce. The lawyer said there's no rush to serve him until everything is fully locked down. Rachel nodded, staring at her sister for a long time, like looking at someone she thought she knew, but was meeting for the first time. Anna, she said softly, if you need to cry, cry. It's okay. Later, Anna replied. Right now, I need my head clear. When this is done, I'll cry. Rachel stayed until 10. They drank tea and talked about practical things, where to hide the documents, how to act when Michael got back. Rachel offered to let Anna come stay at her house for a while. Anna refused. No, she was staying here. This was her apartment, and she wasn't leaving it. When Rachel left, Anna walked through the rooms. She stopped in the bedroom, looking at the big bed with its 2 pillows and the duvet cover she had spent picking out 3 years ago from a catalog. She wanted it to look nice, like a magazine. She stopped in the living room, where their wedding photo sat on the bookshelf, her in white, him in a suit, both of them smiling. She didn't take the photo down. Not yet. She looked into the storage closet and flipped on the flickering bulb. The metal box was back in its place, hidden behind the pickle jars, as if nothing had happened. Anna turned off the light and closed the door. Then she sat at the kitchen table, flipped to a fresh page on the legal pad, and wrote, Friday. He comes back. Be ready. On Thursday, she went to work as usual, a standard day at the clinic. Spreadsheets, data entry, phone calls. Her coworkers didn't notice a thing. Anna drank coffee in the break room, laughed at a joke from Natalie at the front desk, and signed an invoice for office supplies. Everything was exactly the same except deep in her purse inside. A zippered pocket was a USB drive containing scans of every single document made the day before, just in case. On Friday morning, Anna took the metal box out of the closet. She mechanically wiped the dust off it with a microfiber cloth, then placed it in the exact center of the kitchen table, right between the salt shaker and the napkin holder. Next to it went the blue folder. Then she tidied up the kitchen. She washed the dishes, wiped down the stove, hung up fresh towels, poured herself a cup of tea, and waited. Michael arrived in the late afternoon. She heard the heavy lobby door shut, then the heavy, slow, tired footsteps on the stairs. The key turned in the lock. He walked in, exactly the way he had hundreds of times before. Suitcase dropped in the corner, jacket tossed on the hook, shoes kicked off without untying the laces. Anna, I'm back, he yelled from the hallway. Is there anything to eat? He walked into the kitchen, opened the fridge, grabbed the water pitcher, poured a glass, took a gulp, turned toward the table, and froze. The glass stopped halfway to his mouth. The metal box sat in front of him, open. The photographs fanned out like a deck of cards. Next to it, the blue folder, thick with printed pages, and Anna, sitting on the other side, her hands folded neatly in her lap. For a few seconds, he just stared. Then, very slowly, he lowered the glass to the edge of the table. Water sloshed over the rim and dripped onto the wood. He didn't notice Anna spoke first. Sit down. He sat, not in his usual chair by the wall, but on the stool closest to him, the one that wobbled slightly on the uneven floor. He sat and stared at the box with the look of a man seeing an object that defied the laws of physics, as if reality had cracked open and what was supposed to stay buried had crawled out. Anna didn't rush. She picked up the first photo, the Christmas one, where he's smiling next to Megan and holding Sophie, and slid it across the table. He looked at it, then quickly looked away. Second photo, summer, the park, Sophie in her sandals. She laid it next to the first. The child's drawing, Daddy Michael, I love you. She laid it down. The lease agreement, laid it down. Receipts for toddler boots and paint sets, laid them down. The greeting card, we are waiting for you at home. We miss you. Your girls, laid it down. The bank statements, a year and a half of wires, 2 or 3 times a month, straight from their joint account, laid them down. The email chain with Ryan, about forging her signature to sell her car, laid it down. And finally, the piece of paper with the exact dollar amount of Grandma Celia's farmhouse and the heavy question marks. She laid it down. The table between them was covered in paper, a hand of cards, fully revealed. Anna sat perfectly still and waited. Michael stayed silent for a long time, maybe a minute, but the minute stretched out like rubber. In the quiet, you could hear the ticking of the pendulum clock, and through the wall, the faint voice of a local news anchor TV. Then he spoke. His voice was raspy, like something was caught in his throat. Anna, you're completely misunderstanding this. It's a complicated situation. It's not what you think. She didn't interrupt. She simply reached into the folder, pulled out the bank statement from the previous month with 3-wire transfers highlighted in neon yellow and pushed it toward him. Listen. He leaned forward, resting his elbows on the table. I can explain everything. It's not what it looks like. It's a completely different story. Anna stayed silent. She picked up the email printout about selling her car and tapped it with her index finger. That was when the switch flipped. 1 second he was begging, and the next, his eyes turned hard, his jaw clenched. You went digging through my stuff. I told you not to mess with that closet. That's my stuff, my space. You had no right. Anna waited for him to finish. He ran out of steam, quickly. The anger was hollow, because the evidence was sitting right there, and they both knew his outrage was absurd. It was like a man screaming, I didn't do it, while standing overshadowed. A vase with a hammer in his hand. His shoulders slumped. He dropped his head, buried his face in his hands, and started speaking in a muffled mumble. I got lost. Anna, I didn't want it to be like this. I love you both. It just happened. I didn't plan it. Sophie, she's a little girl. I couldn't abandon a little girl. Do you understand? Every single day I thought about how to fix it. Every day I pushed it off because I didn't know how. Just give me time. I'll explain everything. Let's just sit down and talk. Anna listened. She waited to feel something. Pity, maybe, or at least that familiar softness, that internal yielding that had made her compromise. For 9 years, the urge to say, okay, maybe, we'll figure it out. But inside, she was utterly quiet, like a room that had been emptied of all its furniture, hollow, echoing, every sound bouncing cleanly off the walls. You weren't building a marriage, Anna said. It was the first time all night she had spoken about herself. Her voice was steady, no shaking, no yelling. You were building a fire escape. You were siphoning money. You were trying to sell my car. You tracked my inheritance. That's not getting lost. That's an exit strategy. Michael lowered his hands and looked at her, and she saw that for the first time all night. He was actually seeing her, not as his wife, not as someone to manage or pacify, but as a person who knew exactly what he was and who was never going to. Again, he had no answer. Anna stood up. She gathered the documents from the table carefully, stacking them in the exact same order she had laid them out, and slid them back into the blue folder. The photos went back into the tin box. She snapped the lid shut. I'm filing the divorce papers next week, she said. The apartment is mine. I bought it before we were married. The car is mine. The title is in my name. The joint checking account is currently at 0. If you want to discuss the details, you can call Mr. Hayes. Here is his number. She set the lawyer's business card on the table and walked out of the kitchen. Michael sat alone at the table, staring at the empty space where his meticulously constructed double life had just been dismantled. The glass of water still sat on the edge of the table. The puddle had expanded and was dripping slowly onto the floor. Legally, the whole thing took 4 months. At first, Michael was convinced he could drag it out. Stalling was his superpower, perfected over 6 years of living a double life. He hired a cheap attorney, a buddy, recommended, and the guy immediately started filing motions to delay the hearings, requesting extensions, demanding property appraisals. Standard tactics: exhaust the other party, drain their energy, wait for them to give up and settle. But Anna didn't give up, and she didn't settle. In the first mediation session, the reality Michael hadn't expected came too late. That joint account he relied on, empty. The funds had been legally transferred by a co-signer of the account. His debit card frozen. A temporary restraining order had been placed on the car, the apartment, and any asset that could be remotely considered marital property. And Anna's side brought a mountain of paper, statements showing the wire transfers to Megan, the emails with Ryan the car guy, the notes tracking her inheritance. Mr. Hayes operated with the cold precision of a surgeon. In the second hearing, he handed the judge 18 months of bank statements, proving Michael had systematically drained marital funds behind his wife's back. Michael's lawyer tried to argue they were routine domestic expenses, but the amounts, the frequency, and the name on the receiving account spoke for themselves. The judge, a woman in her 50s with exhausted eyes and reading glasses perched on her nose, looked at Michael over her frames and said nothing, but the way she forcefully squared the stack of papers on her desk made it clear she understood exactly what kind of man was sitting in her courtroom. The car, Michael didn't get it. Bill of sale in Anna's name, dated prior to the marriage. Insurance policy paid exclusively from her personal account. Mr. Hayes brought it all. Michael tried to claim he had invested significant sweat equity into maintaining the vehicle, but he couldn't produce a single receipt for an oil change or new tires because he hadn't bought them and paid for the upkeep. Michael just drove it, the apartment, the one where they had lived for 9 years, with the flickering closet bulb and the ticking pendulum clock. Anna kept it, purchased 2 years before the wedding, entirely with her own money. The deed and title were rock solid. Michael tried to argue he had made substantial renovations that increased its value. Mr. Hayes asked for contractor invoices, receipts for lumber, or even a before and after photo. Michael had nothing. Anna had managed all the upgrades. She had picked out the backsplash. She hired the painters. She wrote the checks. Michael had once screwed a curtain rod into the drywall, and that was the absolute extent of his contribution. By the 3rd month, Michael changed his strategy. He stopped calling Mr. Hayes and started calling Anna directly, first at night, then during the day while she was at the clinic. His tone varied wildly, begging, annoyed, soft, nostalgic. He was trying on voices like a burglar, trying different keys on a lock that had already been changed. Anna, let's just meet and talk. No lawyers. We're adults. We can settle this between us. She answered exactly once. Everything I had to say, I've already said. After that, she stopped picking up. She didn't block his number. She just let it ring. Her phone would vibrate on her desk, the screen flashing Michael, and Anna would watch the letters glow until the screen went dark. She was amazed at how little that name meant to her now. 9 years ago, it meant the world. For months ago, it still meant something. Now, it was just pixels on a screen that would soon be deleted. At the start of the 4th month, Michael stopped calling. A week later, he signed the settlement. The divorce was finalized in the dead of winter, on a Thursday, in a courthouse hallway that smelled like floor wax and cheap coffee. Anna signed the decree, took her copy, and walked out the double doors. A freezing drizzle was falling, turning the sidewalk slick. She stopped on the top step, tilted her head back, and stood there for 10, maybe 15 seconds. The icy droplets hit her cheeks and rolled down her neck. Then she tucked the envelope into her tote bag and walked toward the train station. She found out what happened with Megan slowly, in pieces, without actively looking for it. The world is a small place. After the confrontation in the kitchen, Michael had gone straight to Megan's apartment. He didn't call ahead. He just showed up with his suitcase that same night, exactly the way he had hundreds of times before. He rang the bell. Megan opened the door, looked at the suitcase, looked at his pale, panicked face, and understood instantly. She kicked you out, Megan said. We're getting a divorce. He replied quickly, as if terrified she'd close the door. Before he finished his pitch, it's going to be different now. I'm moving in. Here. For real. Just like you wanted. Megan stood in the doorway and looked at him. For 6 years, she had waited for those words. For 6 years, she had fantasized about the day he would show up and say, I choose you. And here he was, with his luggage, with his promises, ready to commit. Except it felt entirely different now. It didn't feel like a choice. It felt like a man running out of a burning building and diving into the nearest open window. You didn't come to me because you want to be here, Megan said quietly. You came here because you don't have anywhere else to go. He started pleading. He swore that wasn't true, that he had wanted this for a long time. He just couldn't pull the trigger. But now they could finally be a real family. Megan listened. She thought about how, just 3 weeks ago, she had sat in her kitchen with Anna, a stranger, her man's wife, and how both of them had the exact same look in their eyes. Exhaustion, not anger, not jealousy, just the bone-deep exhaustion of living a lie that had dragged on so long it disguised itself as normal life. No, Megan said. I don't think so. The next day, she gathered the rest of his things, 2 duffel bags, his heavy winter coat, his snow boots, his electric razor, his phone charger, the stack of dress, shirts he kept in her closet. She packed it all neatly, zipped the bags, and carried them down to the lobby. The building superintendent, an older guy who knew Michael well because he'd seen him walking past the front desk for 5 years, was at his post. These are Michael's, Megan told him. He'll be by to pick them up. The super looked at the bags, then at her, and didn't ask a single question. He just dragged them over to the wall by the mailboxes. Michael came by to get them. That afternoon, he tried to buzz up to the apartment. Megan didn't answer the intercom. He stood in the lobby pressing the button over and over. Silence on the other end. Then, the crackle of the speaker, and little Sophie's voice. Mommy. Who is it? Nobody. Sweetie. Wrong apartment. He left. He moved into the spare bedroom of his buddy Jason's place. Jason was divorced himself and lived in a 2-bedroom apartment out in the suburbs. The spare room was bare. Just a sagging futon and a closet missing a door. The whole place smelled like stale cigarette smoke and cat food. Jason's tabby cat roamed the apartment like he owned the deed and slept wherever he pleased. Jason was just happy to have the company and someone splitting the rent. He didn't ask too many questions. He'd been through the grinder himself. Michael lived out of his 2 duffel bags in that room, spending his nights scrolling through his phone, staring at old pictures of Sophie that Megan had texted him back when things were good. She hadn't blocked his number. He read and reread the old message threads, and it was the only time any life returned to his eyes. About 6 months after the divorce, Anna heard the rest of the story from Jason himself, who she bumped into at the grocery store. Michael was desperately trying to get back with Megan. He'd buy toys for Sophie and leave them with the super in the lobby. He wrote Megan long, groveling emails. He'd show up and sit on the bench in the courtyard waiting for them to come outside. She won't let him up, Jason said, standing in the checkout line, holding a box of pasta and a jar of instant coffee. Yesterday he sat on that bench for 2 hours. Sophie saw him from the window and waved. He waved back. Then Megan just pulled the blind shut. Anna listened, nodded politely, paid for her bread, milk, and oranges and walked out. The street was warm with a late spring breeze. She thought about Sophie, waving to her dad from the window, and the blind snapping shut, and she realized that this story didn't have a happy ending. It only had different degrees of sad ones. Then she realized something else. It wasn't her story anymore. She was entirely free of it. That autumn, Anna finally tackled the project she had been putting off all year. On a Saturday morning, she put on an old pair of jeans and a faded t-shirt, tied her hair back with a bandana, and opened the door to the storage closet. The flickering bulb greeted her with its familiares tutte. Half a second of light, half a second of dark. Anna reached up and unscrewed it. She walked down the hall to the bathroom cabinet, grabbed a brand new 60W LED bulb from the spare pack, walked back, and screwed it in. The closet flooded with bright, steady, quiet light. For the first time, she saw the whole space, clearly without shadows. 5 by 3 feet, the linoleum peeling slightly. In the corners, 4 wooden shelves bolted unevenly to the drywall. On the bottom shelf, the tools nobody was ever going to use. The power drill Michael had used to hang 1 curtain rod. In 9 years, the tackle box full of mismatched screws, the crescent wrench. On the middle shelf, his mother's homemade pickles, cloudy brine, rusted lids. Anna picked one up and checked the date sharpened on the top. 3 years old. No one had opened them. No one was ever going to. She started at the top. She pulled down the empty cardboard boxes. One had a cracked lampshade inside. Another was just a tangle of old extension cords. The third was empty. She threw them all into a heavy-duty trash bag by the front door. Next, the jars, one by one, heavy and cloudy. She carried them into the kitchen, popped the lids, and dumped the contents down the garbage disposal. Cucumbers, peppers, some kind of unidentifiable relish. All of it went down the drain. She washed the glass jars with hot soapy water and left them upside down on a dish towel to dry. She packed the tools into a plastic crate. They might be useful. She kept the drill, kept the screws. The crescent wrench was handy. Rachel had mentioned. Eric lost his. She'd give it to him. By noon, the shelves were totally bare. Anna wiped them down with a damp rag. The cloth turned dark gray after one swipe. She rinsed it, wiped again and again. Then she scrubbed the walls as high as she could reach. And finally, the floor, beneath the layer of grime. The linoleum was actually a light, cheerful beige. She had forgotten its original color. On the clean shelves, she began to place her own things, a box of photographs, not wedding albums, not pictures of Michael, her own history, childhood, Polaroids, pictures of her and Rachel at Grandma Celia's upstate farmhouse, her mother as a young woman, Grandma standing under the apple trees, high school yearbooks, next to the photos, a stack of hard cover books that didn't fit on her bedroom bookshelf. Anna loved to reread her favorites, and some of them were so well loved the pages were soft and wavy. Beside the books, a small velvet box containing Grandma Celia's silver and turquoise earrings, which Anna rarely wore but guarded fiercely. On the bottom shelf, she placed her own jars, peach preserves. She had made them herself this past summer for the first time in her life, following a recipe she found online. They turned out a little too sweet, but Rachel swore they were perfect stirred into hot tea. Good enough. 3-quart-sized jars with cute labels she had cut from cardstock and written on with a marker, peach, summer. She took a step back into the hallway and looked. The closet was small, bright, and spotless. It smelled like fresh pine cleaner and faintly of sweet peaches. Even though the jars were sealed tight, the shelves were full, and every single thing on them belonged to her, from the photo albums down to the last screw in the tackle box. Not a single trace of anyone else, not a single foreign object. Anna leaned against the doorframe and thought about how, just 6 months ago, she had been standing on a step stool in this exact spot, reaching over those cloudy jars, and how a metal box had crashed to the floor, popping its lid and splitting her world cleanly in half. It didn't happen because of a dramatic fight or a cruel, calculated confession. It happened because of a cheap tin box hidden behind some pickled cucumbers. She could have stayed off the stool that day. She could have listened to Michael and respected his territory. She could have lived another year, 2 years, 5 years in that dim, flickering half-light, mistaking it for a marriage. But she climbed the stool, and the box fell at the worst possible time, or at the exact right moment. She still wasn't sure which it was. Maybe it was both. She hit the switch, turning off the steady, bright light of the new bulb, and closed the door. The latch clicked shut. The kitchen was full of late afternoon sun. The window faced west, and the autumn light spilled across the table, across the floor, catching the red geraniums Anna had bought over the summer simply because she saw them at the nursery and thought, "Those are pretty. I'll take them." In the past, she would have texted Michael, "Do you care if I buy some plants for the window?" Now, there was no one to ask, and that felt incredibly good. She poured herself a mug of tea, sat down at the table, and wrapped both hands around the warm ceramic. Outside, it was a crisp, dry autumn day. The trees in the courtyard were turning gold, and a faint smell of wood smoke drifted in from the suburbs, mixing with the smell of roasting chicken from the neighbors. Downstairs, she had a lot ahead of her. Anna knew this, not in a vague, overwhelming way, but in the highly specific, manageable way of a daily to-do list. She needed to call the plumber to fix the bathroom sink that had been dripping for a week. She needed to swap out her summer clothes for her winter sweaters. She needed to call her mother and finally tell her the whole story. She had been putting it off to spare the older woman the stress, but it was time. She needed to schedule her dental cleaning. She was 6 months overdue. She needed to pick out new wallpaper for the bedroom. She was tired of the old pattern, and Rachel had offered to come over this weekend and help her strip the walls and hang the new stuff. Small, ordinary, living tasks, the things a real life is made of. Anna finished her tea, washed the mug, and set it on the drying rack. Then she picked up her phone and texted, "Rachel, come over Saturday. Let's pick out that wallpaper. I'll send you home with a jar of the peach preserves I know you're out. Rachel texted back. Less than a minute later, I'm in dragging Eric with me to fix that crooked curtain rod in your bedroom. It's been driving me crazy for 3 years. Anna smiled, not the polite, tight-lipped, half smile she had trained herself to use over the last few years, but a real smile, the kind where the corners of your mouth lift all on their own, completely without effort. Outside, the sun was sinking behind the brick. Rooftops and the shadows in the courtyard were stretching out. Down below, a kid laughed aloud, full belly laugh. On the bench by the lobby doors, Mrs. Higgins was gossiping with another neighbor. Snatches of the conversation floated all the way up to the third floor window. So I told him, you have to actually water the roots. You can't just complain about the leaves. An ordinary autumn afternoon, an ordinary apartment building, an ordinary life. Except now, it was hers, truly, completely, entirely hers.